Hello, aspirants. Welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm here preaching with the daily analysis of the Hindu from 15th of October 2024. Let's begin today's analysis. Here is the QR code of the Telegram account where you can basically download this particular PDF, which all the stuff has been written along with the other material that is required for your preparation. So, what all topics are we taking for today's analysis? First, space-based surveillance mission, important from General Studies Paper 1 and Paper 2 for that matter. Central Administrative Tribunal, important from General Studies Paper 2. Global Hunger Index, again important from GS3. It can also be asked in GS Paper 1 and 2 for that matter. Editorial on gig economy. Then we have the news in shots, important from your prelims perspective, and the MCQs for your prelims practice. Let's begin today's analysis. So, a very important article that has been in news, space-based surveillance mission. Now, before we begin this, you will be realizing that when Osama bin Laden was being targeted, or let us say during the Afghanistan war, which America had started in order to remove the terrorists that were present there, did you realize that United States made a very effective use of this space-based surveillance? They used to use the satellites to identify the people. Even you won't believe that Osama bin Laden's identification through the height, through the shadow that was basically casted on the ground, was observed by the satellite, and based on that, certain verifications were made. So they identified Osama bin Laden is there in Pakistan. So do you realize that space-based surveillance becomes very important? That basically includes the use of obviously the satellites, the drones, and various other aspects associated with that. But it is very, very important because we know very easily that there are lesser chances of face-to-face war, but the cyber war and the space war is what are the new dimensions of the modern day warfare. In that perspective, the space-based surveillance mission becomes very important for India. That is why we realize that the Cabinet Committee on Security has approved Phase 3 of India space-based mission. That is Part 3 of Phase 3. Now, please see, the space-based mission, SBS-3 mission, will be strengthened by India's purchase of 31 Predator drones from the United States, which even the United States uses for its surveillance mission. Along with it, the cooperation and collaboration with France with respect to the military satellites. So again, collaboration is being done with the United States as well as France, along with the satellite technology that we have, and along with France and their drones, is going to make an effective way of space-based surveillance in India. Now let us move ahead and see certain dimensions. See, what is the SBS mission, space-based surveillance mission? The project basically involves launching of 52 spy satellites in low Earth and the geostationary orbits. Now, these are again very important with respect to surveillance, what system that the United States has. So this becomes very important. Now see, what is the purpose? The project aims to enhance India's space surveillance and capabilities for national security, as we have already discussed in the starting. Now, the National Security Council Secretariat and the Defense Space Agency under the Ministry of Defense are managing the SBS mission. Now, these two bodies become very, very, very important. The reason behind it is in the examination, you can be asked which all bodies are basically involved who are handling the SBS mission. They might mention some other, let us say, Ministry of Space simply. Then you will be getting confused. So that is why we have to be very careful about these things. That is why I've changed the color of these two bodies when I've written on the board so that you can easily observe them. Next is each branch of the armed forces, Army, Navy, and Air Force will have dedicated satellites. Now, this is again an interesting thing. All the three branches are going to have dedicated satellites for their use, for the surveillance, and for the intelligence purpose. As we move ahead, we just now read that this is SBS-3. That means the space-based surveillance phase 3. So what were the previous two? Please understand, these are the old ones. SBS-1 was launched in 2001 with 4 satellites. SBS-2 introduced in 2013 with 6 satellites. And we should all remember that long way to go. We need 52 satellites for a proper surveillance network. This is the part of the satellites, along with it, the drones that are being purchased from the United States. Next, what are the benefits of SBS-3? Now, please understand, enhanced satellite detection, improved data analysis of what you're getting, round-the-clock monitoring, enhanced national security, and support from the armed forces. Because whenever we used to need some data, we were again dependent on the other countries. And it used to depend on the other countries' whims and fancies, whether they want to share the data or not. And that is why that used to create or stigmatize our national security. In this case, we realize that when we come across this 52 networks, when they're all launched, when they're all in place, we will be having a comprehensive set of satellites which can monitor our neighbors, the enemy countries also, what all activities are going on. Along with it, the data collection from that sources will be further analyzed, and what action has to be taken and how things have to be dealt will be then considered as per the requirements. But as we know that every point has the other side of the coin also. So there are certain disadvantages that have been mentioned. Now what? The high cost is involved, close to 27,000 crores. Now, if you see the cost, yes, but if you see any nefarious activity in the form of, let us say, terrorist activities taking place, we realize that that cost itself is humongous. So yes, a long-term cost, but overall it is beneficial for the country. Technological challenge, launching and maintaining 52 satellites. This is again being a challenge for India, because along with the cost, the launching of those 52 satellites, few have been launched, but many are remaining, as you saw just now. Their maintenance, the concept of their repair possibly, if some malfunctioning happens, relaunching of certain satellites, all these things involve a lot of expenditure. Then, dependency on the foreign technology. Right now you saw that we are basically going to import the drones from, or buy drones from United States. Yes. Along with it, we are going to have a technology or technology sharing with respect to France, with respect to the satellites. Right now, yes, we are advancing with respect to our technology, but right now there is a lot of dependence also on the foreign technology. And that is again with respect to national security. When it comes in a long term, we need to be Atmanirbhar, as what the agenda right now always has been with respect to the indigenous production. Next is now potential of misuse. Supposingly, we realize that there is some hacking that takes place. Now, you cannot deny that. However secure a digital platform might be, there is a possibility of hack taking place. And supposingly, if that hack takes place and it falls in the wrong hands, almost all the assets of India, all the surveillance information can be again taken up and sold in the market, and especially to the enemy countries like Pakistan and China. Now, that is where the issue lies. So these are certain disadvantages. So why this is important also, please remember, when we are involved in such a massive process or task, we should also know what are the other sides so that these can be worked and resolved. That is the important aspect. So next, moving ahead. Next topic. Now see, there was a certain article which I saw, cancel the repatriation orders of Telangana IAS officers. Now this is something that some IAS officers from the state of Telangana being transferred, let us say, move to the other cadre of Andhra Pradesh. That is not a concern. Our concern is that they requested or went to the CAT, that is the Central Administrative Tribunal. Now these things become important for us. Now, as a person who's preparing for civil services, from the polity aspect, CAT is a very important dimension. Now, what is CAT? We need to study a little bit of the information, because it has been asked in your prelims also, it can be asked in your mains also, along with, let us say, a 10 marker. What is CAT? What are the dimensions associated with CAT can be asked in your paper. Now see, Central Administrative Tribunal, and short form it is known as a CAT, has been established under the Constitution under Article 323A. That means this is important, a constitutional body, right? Now, what is the mandate? What is the mandate or task that is bestowed on that? See, to adjudicate disputes and complaints. So whatever complaints and disputes are coming to the CAT, that is a Central Administrative Tribunal, they have to resolve it with respect to the recruitment. Let us say there are certain issues with respect to the government files it, or for that matter, even a public servant files it. There are certain issues with the recruitment, you can go to the CAT. Or conditions of service, any dimension associated with the condition of service of persons appointed to the public service and post in connection with the affairs of union and other authorities under the control of the government, because it is central administrative tribunal. So basically the all India servants as well as the central government employees officers are basically approaching them, the central administrative tribunal. So to resolve the disputes, the complaints relating to recruitment, condition of service of the let us say the persons who are appointed to the public service under the union or the associated post under the union can go to the CAT and get their issues resolved with respect to, let us say, condition of service, recruitment, or whatever dimensions related to these topics. Now, as we move ahead, we realize that there is certain legal framework, because we had the Article 323A. With respect to this Article 323A, Parliament passed the Administrative Tribunals Act 1985. Now, what does this act do? This act authorizes the central government to establish one CAT, that is the Central Administrative Tribunal at the central level, for resolving the issues and grievances with respect to recruitment, condition of service for the persons appointed under the Union of India, right? And the State Administrative Tribunal with respect to those in particular states and the issues concerning those people with respect to the various states. Now, benches, there are 19 benches in the CAT all over India. Now, what is the composition? CAT is a specialized body consisting of administrative members as well as the judicial members. So, CAT doesn't mean this tribunal does not have simply judicial members. No, it has administrative members also. This is something that can be asked in your papers. A chairman who has been sitting or a retired judge of the High Court heads the CAT, right? So, this is basically the aspect and operating principle. Please understand, the tribunal is guided by the principle of natural justice in deciding cases, not bound by the civil procedure code. What does this mean? Supposingly, the civil procedure code lays down certain guidelines with respect to, let us say, some issue. Now, the CAT is not bound by that. If it's feel that there is some gross injustice being done, so they can resolve their issue based on the problem that is concerned, simply not confining them to the civil procedure code. So they can go beyond it. In the case there is grave, let us say, violation of violence, that violation of the, let us say, justice that has taken place. So this again becomes a statement that not bound by the civil procedure code. This is again very important ingredient. Now, let's come to the next topic, that is a Global Hunger Index 2024. Again, a very bad news with respect to the aspect of hunger. We realize that India's rank is 105th out of 127 countries. Now, this is again, I would say, a really bad news with respect to the effort that is being put under so many schemes. We have midday meal schemes, we have the Poshan Abhiyan going on, we have so many iron folic tablets are being given at various level to the women to resolve the issue of anemia. We have so many schemes there, but still there are a lot of loopholes and we see this outcome. Multiple reasons are there. Let's see, analyze them. Reports finding. What is the reports finding? See, over here, we'll be seeing the broad aspect and then we'll see with respect to India in particular. India is placed in a serious category, that means serious hunger issues, along hunger levels, along with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Can you imagine? India is ranked in this category of serious hunger issues with respect to Pakistan and Afghanistan. On the other hand, countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka are in a better level in the moderate category. So their rank is better. Rank of Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka is better than India. Now, globally, remember, 733 million people face hunger. 2.8 billion people unable are to afford a healthy diet. And these are grave concerns. Various reasons are there. You realize there are a lot of instability in the regions like, let us say, the Middle East. You realize that cost of living is increasing across the world. We realize that in spite of getting educated, people are not getting their jobs. Multiple dimensions are there. Unhealthy eating. What does it do? In a way that the poor sections due to various reasons, let us say caste-based violence, class-based violence, religious-based violence, all these violence, what they do? They basically deteriorate their conditions in the society and later on make them vulnerable groups also. So we realize that multiple things can be there. Then ineffectiveness of the government schemes across the world. Though a lot of effort is being put, let us take the case of India. A lot of effort is being put at the various levels, but we realize that in spite of that, certain loopholes are there with respect to the targeted audience. Now, these things have to be done or properly adhered to if we actually want to remove hunger. Even today, 80 crore people come under the gamut of the National Food Security Act. 80 crore of the 140 crore. If we go by the 2011 census, then it is 1.21 billion. And just imagine that 80 crore people out of them are basically again having the access to the food security. In spite of that, we realize that there are issues of hunger. That means there are problems of availability again in some way, accessibility, right? And affordability. So these things are what need to be worked on, because the schemes are fine in Indian level also, but the implementation issues are one that are creating the problems. Now see, with respect to India, please understand, when we talk about the hunger index, obviously there is an overall score based on which we basically judge what is the rank, but we realize that there are certain words you need to understand. Under the hunger index, we realize certain words are there, like undernourished, stunted, wasted, under 5 mortality rate. Now these are, just imagine the percentages over here. Now see here, the percentage of population that doesn't have enough calorific intake. Just see the percentage. This is undernourished. The definition is undernourished. What is stunted? The percentage of children under 5 who are too short for their age. That means their height is too short as per their age. That is known as stunted. Percentage 35.5%. Next is wasted. Percentage of children under 5 who are too light for their height. That means their weight is too less in comparison to the height. That is wasted. Percentage 18.7%. Under 5 mortality rate, the percentage of children who die before the 5th birthday, that means before they complete 5 years of age, they die. Percentage 2.9%. Now you can see the issues. These are being reflected at the global scale. And that is why we see rank of 105 among the 127 countries. This is again a grave concerning issue with respect to India, because if we have to be a developed nation by 2047, if we do not work on these or resolve these things, because the schemes are there, schemes are working fine, but at the ground level, the implementation is not there. So if we want to be developed by 2047, if these things are not adhered to, our target of being a developed country will again be delayed by further, let us say, close to 30-40 years. Though the target is of 2047, there are certain reports, because of the issues like hunger, poverty and all, it will take at least India close to 75 to 80 years to reach the level of development that we are aiming at. So these are certain things that basically concern India with respect to their planning, policy making and what has to be done in the future. Okay. Then just a background of this report, because this can be asked in your preliminary examination also. The report was first published in 2006, the Global Hunger Index report, by International Food Policy Research Institute, right? Initially. Then we realized, along with Wet Hunger Life Germany Institute, later on joined by Concern Worldwide Ireland in 2007. Initially, these two institutes were working together for publishing this report. Later on in 2007, we realized that 1 year after that, this particular Concern Worldwide Ireland also joined them in publishing jointly. So right now, these three bodies are working together for publishing this report. Yeah, let's move ahead. Okay, now this is something very, very important with respect to the gig economy. Please understand, they talk about the gig workers, they talk about the rights that should be there but are not given to the gig workers. Firstly, let us understand what is a gig worker. But before I tell the definition, I must tell you something, that the definition I'm going to show you right now is something that is given by government, but that is being criticized in this article. We'll see the reason also for that. But let us see what is the definition and then we will understand that before we go to this article. See, Chapter 1, Section 2, Subsection 35 of the Code of Social Security 2020. Now, over here, definition of gig worker is given. What is it? Who is a gig worker? Defines as a person who participates in a work arrangement, earns from such activities outside of a traditional employee-employer relationship. So, do you realize this? I will be mentioning certain aspects also over here. This definition per se is in a way putting the gig worker as some form of informal worker, okay? But when we talk about informal work, you'll be realizing that the concern why government is worried about informal worker is because they do not have access to security measures, social security net, and they are not one of those who might be earning a lot. And that is why there is a risk of their with respect to hunger, poverty, social security aspects, and many issues that prevail. But do you realize that when we talk about gig, it is not simply a informal worker, because this is a very different aspect with respect to the modern economy. Now realize this. You order you order something on Swiggy. Let us say a pizza, Domino's pizza. Now do you realize that the Swiggy person or the person who delivers you is what? Is a gig worker. Who is the aggregator? That means Swiggy. Who is Swiggy linking? Swiggy is linking me as a customer with a Domino's restaurant, right? And that Swiggy, basically the driver picks up it from, that worker picks up from the pizza from the Domino's and brings it to me. Clear? Now that gig worker, you will be realizing that is, yes, to a certain extent you can say informal. If he is working that day, he'll get the income. If not working, he's out of it. He doesn't have any social security net also. Along with it, the companies are not providing him with any, let us say, insurance cover to a certain extent, because earlier they used to, but now that have also been removed. So there are no formal terms and conditions in which they are working like a formal job. And you will see prevalence of poverty also, prevalence of vulnerability also. All these things have been observed. But do you realize that there is another gig worker? Let us say you go to a comedian show, right? A lot of stand-up comedians going on. They charge, let us say, 10 lakh rupees for, let us say, 2 hours or 3 hours of comedy show. And they do 2 to 3 shows every day. And imagine the amount of wealth they might be earning throughout the month. Those are also gig workers. So the concern that happens is simply this definition puts a gig worker and compares them with an informal employment and social sector nets that is required by them. This is something that needs to change also, that what the article is talking about. Because gig worker term itself is something that this definition is confusing. In this definition, they basically use them that gig work is some informal work. That is it. You need to segregate that. There are gig workers. Among the gig workers also, there are certain people who are very poor, just doing like a daily wager. Like in case of Swiggy, they hardly earn, let us say what, not even 1,000 rupees a day, not even 500 rupees a day. But on the other hand, there's some person who's earning 5 to 10 lakh minimum per day. So those both are gig workers. You cannot compare them together. That is why there is issue with the definition, because there's simply concern or focus on them, gig workers as informal workers. Now this is basically the definition. We'll see that. Along with it, please remember, there's one more word that comes here, is an aggregator. Now, aggregator is an institution that connects the buyer and the user of the service with the seller and the service provider. Just imagine, I am here, right? Me. This is Domino's. Now, what is Swiggy or Zomato doing? They are basically linking them, me with this. And these are the ones who have the gig workers, who basically deliver the stuff. Similarly, Uber and Ola. What is Uber and Ola doing? What are they doing? Uber Uber is linking the customer with the driver, right? With the driver. Yes or no? So these are aggregators basically which we see. But they, over here, you will be realizing that they are not treated as employees. They are gig workers, freelancers in a way. So that is also a concerning issue which we will be seeing. So aggregators are the ones who institutions that connect the buyer. So these are like aggregators. Uber, Zomato, Ola. So let's see the article concerning here. We realize that the article talks about a lot of things that government is basically working on framing a law in which, let us say, the gig workers would be covered under the social security schemes. At what all people who are involved in these gig work as gig workers, certain schemes can be there for them also. They can register under that, and depending upon, right now it is being framed, certain laws are also being framed with respect to them which will define them even properly, and certain schemes are being planned right now. This is what the editorial, the person in this editorial is basically talking about. Along with we see that the aggregators should, under this law, should be, let us say, changes should be made where the aggregator should contribute 1 to 2% of the revenue to the social security fund. Now please understand, you see Ola, Uber, Zomato, Swiggy, all these companies, they're linking the customer with the person who's basically, let us say, the driver, in case of Ola. So they're saying that out of the total revenue, the companies will be contributing or forming firstly a fund, that is a social security fund, in which of the total revenue they'll be contributing 1 to 2%. Now that 1 to 2% out of the total quantum of revenue, which is going to be very large, they would be basically providing in a way, telling them to provide social security network, social security net to the people who are working even as a gig workers. Because see, the permanent employees who are going to be in their, let us say, offices of Uber, engineers, management graduates and postgraduates, they are in formal employment. They are being paid nicely and heavily also. But these are the ones which is concerning the government right now, because the number of gig workers are increasing day by day. And government right now perceives them as not in the formal sector. That is why they have defined gig workers as their existence of an employee and employer relationship in the traditional sense is not existing. That is why they want, firstly, a dimension of certain social sector schemes coming. Along with that, the aggregator, who is basically under which the gig workers are working, should be given certain social security net via the social security fund that is being created. Now, these are, I would usually saying that, basically being planned and discussed right now. So next thing that is coming here, the writers basically mentioned that there is a law, as I mentioned you, being planned that would be out, that will basically define gig worker and what all things should be done in order to better organize the gig worker sector. The writer over here says that that law will be expected to have a welfare board with respect to the gig workers, and if certain issues happen, they can basically report or complain to the welfare board. The gig workers can complain to the welfare board, and the welfare board will take action against the aggregators or the companies so that their issues are resolved. Before that, government is trying to get them into the social security net because they are very vulnerable to all the problems that are existing. So because of this vulnerability, they are prone to poverty also, large sectors of them. So we need to be focused on, let us say, getting them into the formal sector. Why I am telling you right now, because you'll be remembering this, that I told you that certain gig workers are earning a lot. But what is being done over here is from the perspective that government right now thinks them as informal workers who are not earning a lot. So from that perspective, we are basically studying right now, right? So expected law that the government wants to establish a welfare board. Along with it, they want, if a gig worker is working for a particular aggregator, even if if that particular aggregator or a company wants to terminate the gig worker, earlier what used to happen, you should call them and say, you are not employed anymore, you're out. There was no formal network. So now they want, under the law, possibly a 14-day notice should be given, transparent mechanism should be there, and proper dispute resolution process should be there. This is what is being told by the writer right now here. Along with it, please remember, the labor minister very categorically pointed out that what is right now, what we are working on the law, they wanted to make it mandatory that the gig workers should also be registered. with the company, obviously the Shram portal, but with the company also formal registration should be done. So the registration is again being pointed. So these are basically mechanisms of bringing them into a formal set of the, let us say, working with a company rather than simply being a informal element in the company. As we move ahead, please remember that we'll be seeing that here the definition of the gig worker given in the Social Security Code is being criticized. They say that these were certain things that are being planned by government, which we saw. Now we realize that as we come to 2020 definition, we have seen. Now what is happening is the Social Security Code definition basically sees these gig workers as a subset of the informal economy. When you see the informal economy, you are generally seeing them from an aspect of the vulnerable section. But over here, they say many are very well placed. All those stand-up comedians you see are also gig workers, as I mentioned. But on the other hand, a Swiggy and a Zomato guy delivering food is also a gig worker. So the definition that does it is something very ambiguous. It does not meet the targeted audience or what a gig worker basically means, because within the gig worker also, you need to categorize the people if you want to have a proper social security net for them. Like for example, when you have PDS, you realize you have earlier PDS was for everybody when it was launched. Later on, we realized that targeted PDS came because everybody doesn't need that. Similarly, with respect to the gig workers definition also, there is certain ambiguity and let us say no clear-cut categorization of who a gig worker is that is being mentioned over here. That is why we realize that there is ambiguity that is being mentioned over here. Why? Because ambiguity in the relationship itself, because it says outside the traditional employer-employee relationship. Now you will be realizing that there are many people who are working as, let us say, freelancers in a company. They are doing everything with respect to, let us say, a proper employee-employer relationship is they are earning very well also, but on a contractual basis for, let us say, a long duration. Now, it becomes very difficult to define them whether that particular person is a gig worker or under the formal set or not, because the terms of conditions of that contract might involve certain conditions or facilities being given during that particular period. Now, has that been dealt in this definition? No. So there is a lot of ambiguity in the definition itself again. As we move ahead, we realize that he basically tries to talk about institutional social security and social security schemes. Now see, if you are in a company, right, there is a contribution made to your provident fund, you are given, let us say, maternity leave. All these schemes or the social security that you are given is an institutional social security because that is given as a part of the fact that you are an employee of that particular company. But on the other hand, you realize that there are certain social sector schemes. Let us say that government will be giving certain amount of money if the woman is pregnant and all. That is basically from the government side, certain things are being added. You realize that there's a difference between institutional social security and social security schemes. Institutional social security comes as you are in a formal employment part of the company. But when you are not, when you are vulnerable sections or certain problems you are facing, then there is a input from the side of the government also, where certain social sector schemes are there for you so that they can aid you in your life and solve your vulnerabilities. Now, what is happening is you realize that government is focusing on social security schemes over here, not coming up with the institutional social security. That means over here, again, we see that the government is treating them in a form of informal employment, and they are, in a way, will remain in formal employment. So there is a paradox in the view that the government is happening. They're basically playing over here. They should basically try to introduce the institutional social security rather than simply the social security schemes, because that would again be of temporary nature, not a permanent nature. So when we move ahead, we realize that even in the Industrial Relations Code 2020, where proper mechanism have given how to resolve the disputes, the gig workers have not been included in there because government is saying they are a part of an informal economy. This thing again needs to mend because they also have their rights with respect to the problems they are facing. Their condition of work, the condition of service are subject to the whims and fancies of the companies aggregators, and they tend to exploit them a lot. If they are not subject or under the purview of the Industrial Relations Code and the dispute resolution mechanism, then this process and problems will continue even further. Next, now what is being suggested over here by the writer is that the aggregator should be treated as an employer of the gig workers. Right now, they are not treated as officially employers. Because once they're treated as employers and they as employees, you'll be realizing that there will be a sense of formal relation that is being established. That is what is being suggested over here. Along with it, he gives this case of United Kingdom, where a grievance from the part of an Uber driver, he filed a case against Uber with respect to certain condition of service. In that case, the United Kingdom court stated that this driver is an employee of Uber, which is an employer. That means a sense of formality, a sense of formal nature was basically given over here. This can even be inspired from the UK case, and similar thing can be replicated in India. Next, we realize that the labor code are there. So we need to amend the labor code also, where proper status of the gig workers should also be given and introduced, so that because as a number of gig workers are increasing, first of all, we need to be careful about them, because there are, again, first we need to do the categorization of the gig workers. Some are very well off. So our focus should be on those who are not so well off. A certain categorization and a proper comprehensive definition is given, again, based on the changes that are taking place. Because certain gig workers, again, like stand-up comedians earn a lot, but the Swiggy and the Zomato guy doesn't. So a better definition is what is expected. Second is that bringing them under the labor codes also, that is important. Again, we realize that treating the aggregator as an employee is again what is expected, that certain changes can be made. Along with it, there's laws that are being planned by the government of India. Again, for the welfare board, notice, transparency, dispute resolution, these will basically help in resolving the problems that are being faced. Along with it, not merely the social security schemes, but institutional security is what is required by the people who are right now treated as gig workers. So this is what the editorial basically talks about. Let's move ahead. News and shots, please see UNIFL. Now, what is UNIFL? It is basically United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. See, the Israeli Defense Forces tanks destroyed the main gate of the facility of the UN peacekeeping force in Ramaya in South Lebanon. UNIFL condemned the breach and citing the violation of international law. So just an idea what UNIFL, it was basically established in March 1978 under the Security Council resolution. What are the objectives? To confirm the withdrawal of Israeli forces from southern Lebanon, to restore international peace and security, assist the Lebanese government in re-establishing the effective authority. Now, what is the composition? Approximately 10,500 peacekeeping forces from peacekeepers from 48 countries. Again, important is India is also a contributory to these peacekeepers, along with Indonesia, Italy, India, Nepal, and China. These are the largest. Along with them, again, 48 countries are contributing. India is also a contributory. That is why it becomes important, because this can be asked. Then they will ask another statement. Is India part of it? Yes, it is. Next is seaweed. See, this was a news again. The cultivation of, see, Kappa ficus alaverezi, a non-native invasive species, has been promoted by the Indian government in recent times. So, again, a non-native invasive species being basically being promoted. Why? See, this species is a red seaweed cultivated for its high carrageenan content, a natural thickener and stabilizer used in food, cosmetics, and pharmaceutical industries. Now, please understand, obviously, there will be certain issues also if the invasive species come, but again, government has said to properly regulate it so that it doesn't affect the natural ecosystem, but it holds a lot of economic value. That is why the government of India is basically promoting. The reason behind it is that Niti Aayog published a strategy documentation in 2024 for seaweed cultivation and basically processing. Under this, basically, this particular non-native invasive species is being promoted because of the commercial value that it has under the as a food, as a cosmetic, and in the pharmaceutical industry. This species primarily thrives in the tropical regions. Invasive species, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, defines this particular species as one of the world's 100 most invasive species. But again, if done in a controlled environment, it can be economically very beneficial, adding to, let us say, the economic, let us say, the income of the farmers at a large scale. And obviously, because it gets a lot of remuneration from the pharmaceutical industry, in particular in the cosmetic industry. So again, will be very profitable for particularly the farmers, but has to be in a controlled environment so that it doesn't disturb the natural ecosystem. Again, T10, Army has recently rolled out the first overhauled version of T10 Bhishma tank. Firstly, let us see the photo of the tank. Now, this is the Bhishma tank, right? An interesting one. Let's move here. Now, what is, see, overhauled means that means it has been revamped, right? T10 Bhishma tank, it is a main battle tank used by the Indian Army since 2003. It is an upgraded version of the Russian T-72 tank, weighs about 47 tons, 9.6 meter long and 2.8 meters wide, has a 3-people crew, a commander, gunner, and a driver. Again, you should just be knowing it. Why? They can ask you, T-90 is concerning among the which of the following things? A submarine, a tank, a ballistic missile, or a rocket. These things can be. That is why these small things become very important. The MCQs, okay, let's see. Please pause the video, attempt the question. Pause the video, attempt the question. Pause the video, attempt the question. And these are your answers here. Okay, so this was the analysis of The Hindu along with the news and shorts and the MCQs, along with the editorial from 15th of October 2024. I hope you understood and learned something new. Keep on reading, happy learning, and as we always say in the end, Jai Hind.